at first I just refused them, but then I think if I refuse them, that means I refuse to share my life with them. So gradually, I think I need to join them. And actually, there was a lot of fun.
You go out more? You drink alcohol more?
One of the biggest challenges is the language barrier.
Yeah.
Especially going through all those procedures and the bureaucracy.
I wish we had these sorts of options when I was younger, 16, 17, 18 years ago.
In our days, right? Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun.
And I'm Yi Shu. So today, the phenomenon of cross-border education has been tremendous. I mean, the growth, the proliferation of Chinese going abroad and also foreigners coming here to China to study.
Both directions.
Right. It's accelerated over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You studied abroad.
Exactly. Let me count. 16.
You don't have to disclose
16,
that.
17, 18 years ago. Anyway, long time ago. But what I'm saying is, I mean, in my days.
You were one of the pioneers, yes.
Well, not exactly. Actually, we started like at the end of the 70s, early 80s, and that's when China opened the door again to the outside world. So lots of Chinese students going abroad, supported by the national state scholarship system.
Right.
But later on, I guess, and especially these days, many of the students going to study abroad will be supported by their own families. And we're now seeing more influx of foreign students coming to study.
Right.
It's not just a one-way traffic anymore.
You're totally right. And the foreign students who are coming here to China to study, in the past it was all about language and culture. But now it's about higher education. It's about coming to get master's degrees or even anything postgraduate. It's all available to foreign students these days.
Exactly. What exactly they are, the subjects and disciplines. And we'll talk to the two guests today.
Exactly. We have two guests here who are going to share their experiences studying abroad. First, there's Kent, who's from Canada. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And Xianchi, who is from China but studied abroad. So we're looking forward to hearing about your experiences.
So straightforward. You're from Canada. You're now studying in a foreign country in China. So that's straightforward. What about you, Xianchi? What did you study?
I'm actually in a Jongsbo PKU degree master program.
How did you choose that program?
Actually,
were you chosen by the program?
Is that what usually happens?
Well, sometimes
it's both sides.
Right?
Actually, I really like this program because it's a dual degree, so which means in 2 years I can get 2 degrees from the best universities in 2 countries. And also, I really like to do the development, and Jongsbo is really strong in the international development, and that is my major there. And also, like the Paris. I think it's the dream place for every girl.
Right?
Yeah, this is Paris. So that's why I chose this school.
I want to get to your stories and your experiences while you were on the ground in Paris. But let's turn to Kent. Now, I know that you have a master's degree from Canada.
Yes.
Again, what prompted you to come to China for study?
Well, I think it was very much the program. So I'm also studying at Beijing University. And the university recently launched a new program called the Yanjing Academy Scholarship.
So we're here to share your personal stories, but at the same time, we're also talking about the trend that it seems to be common now for your peers and your peers to at least one day, have some experience, have some international exposure to study abroad. So how many students actually in your class from your undergraduate have studied abroad or now studying abroad?
I think 1/3 of them, like around 40 students, are now in all over the world.
But the thinking's been there all the time for all the students, right? I mean, one day study abroad, spend some time.
I think for Chinese students, right? Like, it's almost a necessary requirement or a dream, I guess a dream that they will all at some point study abroad, just like you.
Yeah, at some point, everyone will go to another country for one semester.
For some time.
For some time. Yeah.
So it's almost a must these days, you think?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah?
Same situation in Canada?
I'd say until recently, it would probably be the opposite. Most people wouldn't go to pursue, say, a master's abroad. Maybe an exchange would be more common. But I think given so many of the shifts around the world, I think it's becoming more interesting to do that, and that's what drove it for me.
Okay.
What about your peers? I mean, when they consider a country for their, future destination for study abroad, would China be one of the choices, potential choices?
I think in my experience in Canada, most students would continue to study in Canada, but I think that might be changing in the future. And many students that I noticed went on exchange to Asia.
Now, Xianzhi, let's talk about your experience in Paris, because you had never really lived abroad. But I'm sure there was a lot of culture shock involved in this. Tell us about some of those pivotal experiences you had.
Yeah. Actually, for me, I think the biggest challenge is French. It is the language, yeah.
The same thing, language.
Yeah, the same thing. And like in France, the procedures are super complicated, starting with the accommodation and then the bank account, the mobile phone, the insurance, a lot of procedures we need to go, and all in French. So this is really complicated. And also like the experience of seeing a doctor, you need to make the appointment, you need to talk with him to explain your situation. So all these things are very complicated and all in French.
Who helped you?
So yeah, that's a point I want to make, because the French people, they're really nice. So I've made some really good French friends, and they helped me a lot on that.
We have a few pictures that you wanted to share with us.
Yes.
Let's take a look of her program in Paris. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is our program. This is a picnic, because in France, all the French people, they like to go out in sunny days. So like after the class, we just go out for picnic.
Right. This is pretty much the picture that you would expect of a student
Did you
in Europe.
have classes outside?
That's one of the classes.
Actually, this is a lecture given by Wang Shi.
Wang Shi,
the
Chinese real estate developer.
Yeah,
right.
So he went to Sciences Po, and we just went to his lecture.
Yeah, did he speak French?
No, he speaks Chinese.
Oh, he spoke Chinese there?
Yeah.
Because
the students went to that lecture, they all know Chinese.
They're all, okay,
right.
because he also speaks really good English.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah. And we went to a bar. The drinking part is really interesting, because in China, I don't know how to drink, and I don't drink. but when I go to France, my friend just asked me, shall we go out? At first, I think, no.
You said, what is that? What does that mean?
No, I don't like alcohol.
Means a lot, right?
Yeah. So at first, I just refused them. But then I think, if I refuse them, that means I refuse to share my life with them. So gradually, I think I need to join them. And actually, there was a lot of fun to drink with them.
Of course it's fun.
This is part of the, I guess the foreign culture you were experiencing at that time. I guess when you talk to people, when you decide to go out or not go out, I guess that's part of the difference, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what kind of differences did you feel?
Well, I think, as she had mentioned, one of the biggest challenges is the language barrier.
Yeah.
Especially going through all those procedures and the bureaucracy. I'd say the sentiment is very similar. As for cultural differences, I thought that wasn't as pronounced because our program was so diverse. I don't think there's any program I know of that is so diverse.
It is an international program,
yes,
anyway.
A truly global program.
Right.
So not only did we understand more about China, but we also got the chance to learn so much more about the rest of the world, parts of the world that you wouldn't get the chance to experience if you were in North America or if you were in Europe.
I wish we had these sorts of options when I was younger, 16, 17, 18 years ago.
In our days, right?
We also talked to another student from Switzerland who studied here at Tsinghua abroad for his postgraduate studies. His name is Christoph. Let's take a look.
Well, it was a women's prison outside of Beijing, and actually a model prison, one of the best prisons in China, I suppose. But it was still very interesting to see a prison in another country once. As a lawyer especially, I suppose it would be interesting for everybody, but as a lawyer especially interesting. Especially I was working at court in Switzerland for 2 years. So I had quite a bit to do with criminal law as well. Seeing another prison was quite interesting.
Visit to a prison, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is the beauty of studying abroad or even traveling abroad, is you see things in that country that you would normally never see in your home country. Xian, so what are some of those things that you might have experienced or saw in Paris that surprised you?
The demonstration.
A prison in Paris? No.
No, the French people, they like to strike. So
strike?
Yeah.
You mean
Yeah, I mean, they
Like
go
as an
out.
employee strike or a protest?
Yeah, this young sports student, they also take part in this kind of...
Students?
Yeah, the
Do
students.
they belong
Student
to
strike.
any unions?
They actually, there was a demonstration about a kind of law, and then the young sports students, they just go out. And the thing that they've done is that they block our school. They use the rubbish bin to block the door of the school.
No school today.
So no school that day, and actually the students from our university, we just discussed about it, whether it is good to do this, because some students, they still want to go to school, but others, they want to join this demonstration.
What was your opinion about the strike? What's your
Wanted
take?
to have a day off.
Yeah, we have a day off. Actually, I think that's very interesting because this is so French. Because French people, they like freedom, and they want to do whatever they want. And demonstration actually is kind of a symbol of French culture, I think. So I feel it's very good to actually to see this kind of things in France.
So I'd like to ask the two, how has this experience, 1 year in Paris and now it's been 1 year in China, how has it changed your mindset, your worldview, your perspective on things?
Oh, totally different
Big
people
question.
now.
Yeah. 先生
I think from the education perspective, in China, we are very comfortable with the teacher leading class, that we need only to take notes and listen to classes. But in Paris, we need to be involved in the class. So I try to be more active to think and to talk. So I think that is a kind of good opportunity for me to share my idea with other students from all over the world, tolerant to the differences that I may encounter when I meet different people. And in that way, I'm more confident and brave to express my own ideal. So I think I became more tolerant and more confident.
Was it difficult to come back?
No.
No, really? Do you miss Paris?
Yeah, I miss Paris a lot because it's very beautiful there.
Yeah, I guess you go out more, you drink alcohol more. Right. What about you, Ken?
Well, I think coming to China and spending time here, living here for a whole year, I think was very transformative. I'd consider myself a well-traveled person, yet at the same time, I think China, especially when I was growing up, was very much removed from the rest of the world. Seeing what it has become and what it will become, I think is very important.
You know what, I mean, when I left China, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought it would be such a totally different country, even had been there before as a visitor for short visits. And then after a few months, I thought, this is not such a different country anyway. I mean, the biggest impression would be, it's not such a different country as we expect it to be.
Well, I think that's also when you get into your daily routine.
Yeah. Is that also the impression you share?
They're different, but in another sense of different. It's not like what I've imagined.
Yes. It is different culturally speaking, but fundamentally speaking, we're not that different.
Right. It's a very small world.
That's
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about how studying abroad affects one person's career. We're going to be joined by two new guests after the break. So I'd like to thank the two of you, Xianchi and Ken, for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Stay with us.
I actually got a job offer after 2 weeks I was here.
After 2 weeks of being in China,
exactly.
doing your program.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty interesting story.
There's been a study that's been done about the salaries of people who study abroad. And
They get more?
Yeah, they get, on average, 25% more
That's a lot.
than their peers. It's a lot.
Yeah, I don't really feel it myself. Welcome back, and now we have two new guests joining us in the studio. Welcome, Dr. G. Yeah, but we have different G's, right?
Yes, different pronunciation. Yeah.
Maybe in ancient times we share the same family name.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have Mr. Capuccio.
Correct.
Yeah, so we've been talking about studying abroad.
yeah.
Okay.
Both of you have studied abroad, and both of you have taken those experiences into your current careers. Can you first tell us what you're doing now today?
Yeah, now I'm an associate professor for the Communication University of China.
Okay.
I'm teaching both to domestic students and international students.
Where did you study?
The Summer-Free University in Vancouver, Canada.
In Canada.
Yes.
For how long was the program?
For 12 months. Just a visiting scholar.
As a visiting scholar. Like I said, it's a visiting scholar program.
Right.
Yeah. But obviously for you, you studied in China, right?
Yeah, I have a master's degree from Tsinghua Taipei.
What was the subject?
Chinese law.
Chinese law.
Chinese law. Yeah.
So this is back in 2005 when
2005,
you came here to China. Before that, you were a lawyer already in.
Yeah, I was a
in
lawyer in Italy, and I just wanted to go overseas for a study program. When I was researching, I found out about this program in China about Chinese law, and I immediately felt, oh wow, this is so interesting.
We're talking about the employment prospect of studying overseas, studying abroad. I mean, how much has it influenced your career prospect?
I think it influenced a lot. When I was in Summer-Free University, which is one of the leading universities in media and communication studies in Canada and also in North America. So I sit in some courses which are very, very interesting for me and very beneficial for me when I go back to China to teach. For example, I learned a lot of how to conduct the seminars with the students coming from different parts of the world and how to organize your syllabus, which is very, very important for a course. So when I go back to China, I joined the Faculty of Communication, University of China. So I started to teach international students. So I just continue my experience as summer freezer in my university.
So we've been talking about studying abroad and international students. So there are a lot of international students at the Communications University of China.
Yes, so far, what I know, I just consult with the international office of my university. They told me that...
Well prepared.
He did his homework.
Yeah, they have more than, nowadays, we have more than 1,100 international students coming from more than 100 countries right now who are starting at Communication University of China.
Right. So you have a very distinctive role as a professor. You teach the international students.
Right.
What do you think you would have done if you had not gone abroad?
Well, that might be impossible because...
No job.
Yes.
No job or just...
Not with the Communications University.
Right, definitely not for international students.
Right, exactly. Because that's also an experiment for my university, I think. It's at the very, very beginning of the internationalization of our academic program for international students. I think it's easier to teach the domestic students because the language, because the environment we're already familiar with. We evolved from student to the faculty.
So this gave you a huge advantage over your peers.
I think so, yeah.
I'm wondering if you can speak for others, basically, because, I mean, we see lots of professors and lecturers in universities in China are the ones who have some overseas study or working experience. Are these universities in China looking for people like yourself with at least some years of studying or living in overseas countries?
As far as I know, yes. They do look for the people who have some kind of overseas experience, no matter degree program or just exchange experience.
How different do you think they are?
It depends on the individuals.
How much of what you experienced in Canada did you incorporate? I mean, obviously you're teaching international students, but in terms of being a professor and researching, like you talked about developing a syllabus, what sort of things did you retain from this Western experience versus what you had learned, here in China?
Well, I thought there might be a lot of differences. I'm still working on the syllabus every year. Now we are working on the new updates of the syllabus before the starting of the new semester. So I think there are a lot of difference, especially concerning, that in China, the university is well established about their programs, their courses, their syllabus. They're already well established. But for the foreigners, I think what I learned from the summer freezer is we can do it, not totally different, but slightly different way in terms of how to get people involved and how to get students to be more active, to talk with the professors and how to ask them to work on their assignment. It's different than the requirement as Chinese students.
Different teaching methodology.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So different story for you.
Well, no, I actually went home for a couple of years.
All right.
And then the firm I was working for, they asked me whether I wanted to go back to China, and I said, yeah, sure, why not?
So we can see totally a clear link between what you're now doing and your study experience in China. I mean, without your master's degree, I guess, you wouldn't get the job.
Wouldn't have been chosen.
I don't think I would be
Based
working in China, yeah, that's for sure.
How did you get that job initially when you returned back to Italy?
I actually got a job offer after 2 weeks I was here.
After 2 weeks of being in China,
exactly.
doing your program?
Yeah, that's actually
What?
Pretty interesting story.
Yeah.
I went out one night.
So going out is important.
Exactly. Sometimes you see. So I went out with with a big group of people from the university actually.
Right.
And we went out to a club, at the Gunti area. And
Which one?
I think I think it was Vix or Mix, one of those two. And I
That's
can't
like
remember.
an audition.
You've been there.
No, I have never been there. I know that there are a few clubs out there. Yeah.
And I met this Italian lawyer there. And so we were just talking and said, "Oh, so what are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm here, I'm studying Chinese law." And he was like, "Well, really? I'm a lawyer, and I have a lot of
like
cases in China, and why don't you send me your CV?" And after 2
And you
weeks,
still had 2 years left of your program.
1 year. It was a
Okay.
1-year program.
Oh, it was a 1-year program.
Exactly.
Okay. There are a lot of international lawyers here in Beijing
There
and in
are,
China.
yeah.
How would you compare, like yourself, who had this experience of studying abroad, and now you're here for 8 years versus some other lawyers who come here, they're sent by their firm without that experience. I'm sure you've encountered many of them.
Well, usually foreign lawyers that come to China, they come here because they have a certain experience that is difficult to find here. So I will find it quite unlikely that a foreign lawyer comes to China just to deal with Chinese law or to deal with things that are, you can find it very easily. You have a lot of excellent Chinese lawyers.
Right.
So usually foreign lawyers, they come here because they have a certain experience in a certain area, which is not common here.
But they don't necessarily have a China experience.
Not necessarily, no.
Right.
No.
Right.
What about you? I mean, you personally, maybe also for other your peers, say, with the overseas study experience, where they come back to China, or when they decide to stay maybe in the country, in Canada or the U.S., which way goes better? Coming back to China to find a job with a credential from a different country, is it a plus?
I think for myself, it's better to find a job here in China because I think we are at a very nice time to internationalize our higher education system. And especially for my university, we are in a very fast lane to develop more international programs. I think we urgently need more faculties coming back from overseas universities. And for myself, I think I really benefit from this kind of intercultural or international experience. For example, I'm teaching the international students, and also I'm involved with a lot of international collaborations between my university and more than 200 universities. That's total for my universities, international collaborations. I'm involved with some kind of partnership between CUC, the short name for my university, and other universities in the West. So I think there are a lot of space for the young faculties to explore and to get involved for the future of the university.
Right. I think it's very obvious that studying abroad helps to open doors and create more opportunities for
especially
people for any field, whether it's academia or if it's law or if it's business. There's been a study that's been done about the salaries of people who study abroad. And
they get more?
Yeah, they get, on average, 25% more
That's a lot.
than their peers. It's a lot.
Yeah, I don't really feel it myself. So what I'm saying is,
What about for you guys? Did you experience this?
well, I'm working for a public university in China.
so you don't really
So
feel
no,
it, does
and
it?
Yes,
you're working
of
for a
course.
public organization in China.
So what I'm saying is, in the 90s, because we didn't really have that many people who had that experience, right, studying abroad. At these years, in the 21st century, especially in the 2016, we're now seeing more outflux of Chinese students going to study and live in other countries, in Europe or in America. And at the same time, we're seeing more people coming back after their graduation. So in other words, we're competing against more people who have similar experiences.
Yes.
So that's still a guarantee of 25% more pay, in the job market, or is it also a guarantee at least that you get a job, a decent job?
Yeah, the job. It's not about the salary, it's about the job, whether you can get the job in such a competitive labor forces.
So
But
here
the-
for Chinese, it's about getting the job. You don't really care about the salary.
We
I mean,
do.
That's the second. Yeah, that's the
It's
second
secondary,
part. Especially
but it's
living in
secondary.
Beijing. Yeah.
But-
We
but-
care
but-
about salary a lot.
Is it still, I mean, have that experience, have that overseas experience, do you think that's still a plus or a guarantee
Yes.
or to some extent?
Yes, of course, definitely.
It plays still an important role.
Yeah, it's very important to make you different from others. You know, when people have no overseas experience, you are just similar with other people.
Right, but I
For the
think what you're
majority.
saying is because there are more and more, it's no longer a guarantee
No.
of employment because there are so many more.
We have an
Right.
employer
Employees out
here.
there.
I know when you employ people,
I do
you
all
look
the
at that
time, yeah.
aspect.
I think definitely it makes a huge difference if you have in your CV an international experience. I think it really makes a difference.
So would you pay your lawyers, your
More,
junior lawyers
25%
more
more?
with that
we
experience?
definitely pay more if the person we are interviewing has an international experience as a master overseas, definitely, yeah.
So I guess the change is in the old days is almost like a guarantee. If not a guarantee, it's a huge plus. But these days, you have to compete with your capability, and how
Yes.
capable you are in work. And at the same time, it seems everyone is seeking the opportunity to study and live abroad. That's almost, to some extent, becoming one of the basics.
It's becoming
you need to have.
ubiquitous. It's commonplace. You know,
That's
a lot
right.
of, especially Chinese students, we talked about it in the first segment.
Yes.
It's
Right.
almost a necessary requirement now. It's a
Yes.
must. I want to thank the two of you so much for being a part of this segment of our program. And Timo, thank you so much. Dr.
Thank
G
you.
is going to stay with us for the
Yeah.
third segment of our program when we talk about teachers who are
Because you're a
teaching
professor, you
abroad
teach.
because he's a professor, right? And the challenges that are associated with that.
Right.
Please stay tuned.
Shemu, master mother.
Shemu,
all right.
And says, Professor is so nice. He explains the problems to us, and he doesn't yell at us.
We're trying to convince you to leave the university now.
Maybe the salary.
And welcome back to Crossover. We talked about studying abroad. We talked about the influence on the job market, really on the employment prospect. And now we're going to talk about a different aspect, teaching international students.
Right. As the internationalization of education increases, that means that not only are students going abroad, but teachers and professors are going abroad too. So joining Dr. G, we now have Dr. Reed, who's from a new program, a new institute that's been developed, and it's between Sichuan University and Pittsburgh University.
University of Pittsburgh,
University of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Okay, welcome, Dr. Reed.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So you're actually teaching in Sichuan University.
Yes. Our institute, SCOOPY, we call it, is a unit of Sichuan University that's joint with the University of Pittsburgh. So we're teaching engineering. This first year, we just started with about 100 students from all across China, and we're going to be growing over the next few years.
All Chinese students or international
Right now, it's just Chinese students,
Just
but we
Chinese students,
we
okay.
hope to be adding international students. In fact, we had one student was from Cambodia the first year, but over the next few years, we hope to get students from other countries.
So Dr. G teaches international students here in China. You teach Chinese students here in China.
with an international program.
Right.
Yes.
And obviously you're from the United States.
Yes, it's international to me.
Right. I was going to say, had you been to China before?
I had been here as a tourist 3 or 4 years ago for about a
Okay.
month. And of course, I've had many Chinese students over the years. My first graduate student was from China. Probably half of my graduate students have been from China.
Yeah,
Because
we study a lot, you know.
Because
we
you
spend
a lot of
teach
time
engineering.
Engineering, yes,
Right.
yeah. So it's very common to have them there. But it's a different experience, of course.
How different is it?
Their preparation is different, their background is different. So the Chinese students that come to America, they have the same background and preparation as the Chinese students here. But they also have a class full of role models. If there's 4 or 5 students, Chinese students, in a class full of American students, they can see aspects of the culture and expectations and learn from their fellow students. Whereas here, I have 100 students, and I'm the role model, and I have to try to change things or get them to adapt to American way of thinking or some Western ideas of engineering.
What have been the major challenges for you as a teacher? You talk about bridging and bringing those students to kind of a different way of thinking.
They have a different background, and there's differences in expectations, I would say. Much of the Chinese students' life, from what I can tell and from what I've read, has been in preparation for the Gaokao.
Right.
They have this sort of laser-like focus on getting the answer, and working on
laser-like.
well, it's
right
true.
To the point.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The Chinese students are very good. They're very well prepared. They do very well in the things that they've sort of been trained to do well in. Okay, engineering, I'm trying to get them to think broadly, to solve new problems. Engineering is all about solving problems and being able to identify the problem. And this they're less adept at, I would say, because of the way they've been educated before. So I want them to be able to look at things more broadly, be able to identify a problem. And in particular, I focus on process, not the answer. I want them to be able to reason from first principles, to apply basic science and engineering principles to new problems. And this is something that, frankly, they're uncomfortable with and is requiring some reorientation.
Have they been able to get there in their first year?
Oh, yes. I think many of them appreciate it very much. It's new to them, but they're excited by it. And I said, they're very good students. We're getting some very good students. So they've adapted to this.
What about Chinese professors, and do they teach in a traditional, say, Chinese way? Like what Xianchi said, our first guest, and she said basically Chinese students are more used to professors, teachers taking the way, lead the way, and then we follow what we're told to do. So, I mean, how different are they? I mean, in terms of the teaching methodology.
We're trying very much to teach using a Western curriculum and a Western methodology. So, for example, in my class, we use this model. We call it a flipped classroom, and the whole idea is active learning. So, traditionally, even in America, when I was in school, it was very much lecture-based. You go in, and the professor talked at you, and you were expected to sort of listen obediently, and then put it back on the exam. In my class, for example, I really lecture very little, and this caused a lot of discomfort with the students. So they would come in. I spend most of my time in class. They do the problems. So I call it a studio. It's a studio problems. So I will give them assignments. They have to work in teams. They all have computers, and they have to work on those problems in the class. And again, what I'm looking for is trying to see how they think and help them think about things in terms of process and how would you apply these principles to other problems.
I can only imagine the look of kind of surprise. I guess your students knew what they were getting themselves into.
We have
but
a
the
lazy
look of
professor.
Surprise, right? That very first day of school.
It was interesting, to say the least.
Now, what about for you, Dr. G? You do teach international students.
Right. I'm now teaching 3 programs for international students.
So it's a different story. I mean, for you, your program pretty much is designed for Chinese students, an international program, but designed for Chinese students. And your program, it seems, is designed for
only for
international students, right?
Yeah.
How different are they?
There are a lot of differences. And I think one of the most interesting programs that I have taught over the past 5 years is the program for developing countries, because that classroom, as Ji Xiaojun just mentioned, is like UN. It involved almost every year, every semester, we have students coming from more than 20 countries in the same classroom. And English language is not their first language or second language even. For example, the students coming from West Africa, they speak their local language and French. Yes. So I think it's very hard to be the lecturer just one-dimensionally teaching about the knowledge about communication theory or media Chinese society. I prefer to consider myself as the coordinator about the in-class discussion.
So that's how you teach.
Yeah.
Yeah. What type of conflict has arose? I mean, you have, like you said, you have a classroom full of people from all different backgrounds and with all different perspectives, and I'm sure you're trying to engage debate. Can you give us some examples of some conflict or controversy that happened in the classroom?
There's one thing that I find very challenging is for the students coming from, for example, from Africa, from Middle East, from Southeast Asia, they have different cultural background, they have different language level, and they have different ways of participating in the classroom. For example, people coming from Africa, they're more active. But for the student coming from, for example, Myanmar, from Thailand, they don't want to speak too much to you.
Because the educational,
just like Chinese students
educational systems are very different. Maybe not in terms of what we learn and the knowledge, but in how we learn and how we're taught.
Right.
There was a very famous documentary that came out last year in the BBC where they sent 5 Chinese teachers to a high school in the UK. I think it was a middle school in the UK, where those teachers taught there for a period of time to see how they would do. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
The Chinese teaching methods came as a shock to the class of British school children, and the students' rebellious response came as a shock to a horrified British nation.
I'm not doing this.
I've never seen a student like you.
As the 50-strong class of 13 and 14-year-olds showed themselves, according to Britain's normally resilient Fleet Street press, to be disrespectful and arrogant. As the weeks passed and the big test neared, relations between teachers and students mellowed, even if the academic regime was unrelenting.
What is needed for photosynthesis to take place? Sophie?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide?
Water.
Water?
And then the sunlight.
Okay, you.
The Chinese students were gripped by a competitive fervour.
Guys, shush.
Would the Chinese or British teaching system come out on top? The pressure began to tell. The English system was successful and innate, but would it deliver?
Well, it is said they have a reverse program. Actually, they're sending some British teachers coming to teach in Chinese high school.
That's
so we'll see how it goes. You know, we don't know. But I mean, what we're seeing is this is a program. I mean, Chinese teachers teaching basic education in high school. I guess that's a different story compared to university undergraduates.
Right.
And at the same time, it shows the differences in teaching methodology and the expectations from both ends. Actually, from the teachers to the students, and from the students to the teachers. Do you also come across things like that?
Yeah, the students, you know, like I said, they didn't know quite what to make of this, the expectations here. But, you know, over time, after a few weeks, they learned what I was looking for, and they would start to catch on and try to anticipate.
They don't do makeup in classroom.
You want your
WeChat.
You want your students to challenge you more, right?
Very much, yeah, and that's still a challenge to get them to do this.
What type of spirit does a teacher or professor have to teach students of another culture? I mean, I could imagine it's like, you know, as a parent, it would be very difficult to parent a child from a different culture because you yourself have not grown up in that culture.
I think that's a requirement for us to prepare for the weekly class. When I was trying to teach some kind of normative theories about the media system, what is the ideal journalism in different countries, I tried to make some connections between China and their own societies. For example, I have a lot of African students, and I tried to work on the histories. You know, for example, in 1960s or 1970s, China has a huge influence in Africa through different, you know, hard power or soft power initiatives. And I tried to find some stories that they might know. For example,
you try to relate it back to them.
Of course, yeah. For example, I remember there's a very famous or popular band called Beyond, which is Hong Kong based in 1990s. They have a very famous song called The Glorious Years to remember one of the famous revolutionary leaders in South Africa, Nelson Mandela.
I didn't know that.
Nelson Mandela. That's the original meaning for that song, Glorious Years. When I play these songs at the very beginning of my lecture, all the African students, they know. Because
Did you sing it together?
No, that's the Cantonese language. I just want to show the video of the music. They know. You know, the video is shot with the actor from Africa.
I never knew that.
Right, that's some connections. You know, as teachers or researchers, we can work on that.
So it comes back to the point. I mean, for a lecturer, for a professor who are to teach international students, and do you think it is necessary for you yourselves to have at least some training on the cross-cultural differences?
Or mindset. I mean, when you're recruiting this international staff for your institute, what are you telling them in terms of, okay, this is what you need to consider before you decide to come?
You know, try to give them an idea of their difference in background and what their expectations are. So before I came, I tried to read as much as possible about the differences with the Chinese system and the American system. But in some sense, there's really no substitute for experience. You know, you can read about something, and it's really important, though, I think, for the faculty to sort of set aside their preconceptions about things and really be open to what you're doing. Concentrate on what you're trying to accomplish.
Dr. Ji, what has been the most rewarding aspect of teaching international students?
I think I make a lot of friends, you know, in the academic circle, for example, because some of my students already developed their career in the universities, back to their own country. So we keep our connection all the time. For example, I'm applying a research project in China about some kind of media system back to their own society. For example, in Myanmar or in Kenya, I can organize a kind of team.
That expands your research base.
Great, yes, students become research partners.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's part of the rewarding experience for me.
That's wonderful.
And also, when I was teaching, when I was interacting with those students, I get a lot of their own living experience in China. So that's a glass, that's a mirror for me to reflect our own study in China, how they understand our Chinese society in such a rapid transition, which is really, really important input to my research.
Right.
Having that experience, you can teach anywhere.
Well,
I mean, you have that international experience of working.
Well, I'm sure that experience, you know, if you wanted to go to a U.S. institution or a UK institution, you can go there and teach for a couple years, you know, or actually be a permanent staff on their faculty to talk about international media.
Yeah,
well, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to convince you to leave the university now.
Maybe the salary would be higher.
25% more.
Dr. Reed, what about for you? You know, it's only been the first year. A very rewarding moment that you'd like to share?
Yeah. You know, teaching is very gratifying. Teaching is love. It's taking part of yourself, your thoughts, your passion for your field, and giving it to someone else and changing them and seeing how they react. And I think that's universal among a lot of academics. They do it out of love because it's a wonderful experience. But in China, having this experience with the Chinese students and seeing their reaction when we're giving them something that is completely outside of their experience, it's just sort of a different degree and a different measure. This actually started very early on. I've been teaching for about 2 or 3 weeks, and with sort of this different style of giving a different type of problem. One of the things that we like to do in engineering is give what we call estimation problems. How much does the air in this room weigh, or how many soccer balls will fit in here? And the students don't really know how to approach these problems. So I was guiding them through this. And the experience I had was we had a matriculation ceremony where the students and the president of the university came, and parents came and met, and we shook their hands. And I introduced one of the students to my wife, charming young woman, and she looks at her and she says, Shimu, Master Mother. And and says, Professor is so nice. He explains the problems to us, and he doesn't yell at us. And I was thinking, wow, Dan, I don't yell at them. So maybe that's been their experience, is that you know, their teachers.
From high school.
Yeah, from high school there. Yeah. That, you know, so in my class, you know, I go and sit next to them, and I one-on-one, I try to be as patient as I can, because it is new and unfamiliar, and I'm pretty demanding as well in terms of what I want from them.
Right. But it seems like these international programs, it's not only about knowledge, but it's about, like you said, connection and relating the material that they're learning back to them, and then also giving them an opportunity to think about things in a completely new perspective. And I think that, I mean, the people who are going to benefit is the next generation, are your students. And at the same time, you're gaining a lot as well. I want to thank the two of you so much for being here with us today and sharing with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for not yelling to us.
And thank you to our viewers at home for tuning in. We'll see you next weekend on Crossover. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.